morning, everyone. That was loud. My name is Molly Griggs. I am the program coordinator at the Norris Lab, and I help run the patient science programs there. We'll talk a little bit about the programs later, but in the meantime, I wanted to introduce our panel. Cortney Gensemer, most of y'all know, is Dr. Cortney Gensemer, is a postdoctoral scholar in the Norris Lab. She is focused on understanding the genetic and mechanistic background of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And she is the reason that we have a patient science program in the Norris Lab right now. Fenner is a third-year MD PhD student at the Norris Lab. He was one of our first year's interns, and so he has been part of the patient science program from the beginning. He's studying how mast cells might interact in EDS. And Sofie Strompf is an undergraduate at George Mason studying neuroscience. She is graduating this coming spring and is doing research there on something complicated that I don't really understand. But she was an intern in our program last summer and was gracious enough to be willing to join us this morning. So if y'all would welcome them. So what we want to talk about today is just what it is like to be a patient scientist. This is a concept that we have been working on in the Norris Lab for the last few years, and we feel like it's important for the community to understand what we mean when we talk about patient science. So we felt like who better to explain it than patient scientists themselves. So Cortney, I'm going to start with you because what the Norris Lab's doing really began with you. Would you tell us a little bit about that story?
Thanks, Molly. So I am a postdoc in the Norris Lab right now, but I used to be a PhD student in the lab. I was diagnosed with EDS when I was in undergrad. I was around 19, which I feel like is a common age for a lot of us to kind of figure out what's going on. I actually thought that I wanted to go to medical school for a long time and sort of fell in love with research. So I decided to go to grad school. Long story short, I followed a boy to Charleston, South Carolina. He's my husband now, so it worked out. But I was actually going to get a job as a lab tech for a year, applied to a bunch of places in Charleston at MUSC. No one called me, no one emailed me, no one showed any interest in hiring me, and decided I would just apply to MUSC because I was moving to Charleston, like why not? I, as Chip loves to say, was waitlisted. They didn't really want me either in the PhD program. But I did end up getting accepted, and the way the PhD program works at MUSC is you do lab rotations. So you spend like 9 weeks or something like that in 3 different labs to try and figure out what is a good fit for you. And I did not know Dr. Norris. I didn't apply there thinking I was going to do my PhD with him or anything. But he spoke to the grad students on the first day. He said, that he had been here. He was actually a student at MUSC at one point and had trained a lot of students. And if anyone kind of felt like they wanted to know more about what the department was doing, or they wanted guidance or like advice for grad school, that his door was always open, which is a policy he still has now for everyone, which is great. And I just thought he was a friendly face, so I said, I'm gonna go talk to this guy. Because I don't know, I'm not even supposed to be here, I don't know what I'm doing. And I knew nothing about his research. He told me that he studied mitral valve prolapse, and I was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. People in my family have that, because we have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. He was like, what type do you have? And I was like, Hypermobile EDS. And he goes, so what gene is that one? And I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure he fact-checked me in that exact moment. And was like, this girl doesn't know what she's talking about, and looks it up on his computer in his office. And he was like, nobody knows. And he's like, well, that's super rare, right? I was like, no, definitely not. And honestly, the Bobby Jones CSF lectures were one of the things that really got him involved after I had shared that I had this. And he was like, oh, I want to learn more about it. And he just kind of was like, oh, well, do you want to find the gene? Do you want to work on that? And I was like, is this normal? Is this how grad school works? I was like, oh, okay, that's what we do here. And I was like, is that weird? I don't know, but it sounds like, a perfect fit. I was super excited. So I rotated in the lab, and not only was I interested in the project, but I immediately found it to be like a very welcoming and accommodating place. I had a lot of health issues, and I never went to him and said like, oh, I have to have surgery, or this is happening, or I'm not feeling well, and he was like, that's not gonna work. Like, he was just like, okay, like, no problem, work from home or do this, and found ways to adapt things for me to make it work. And from there, I obviously joined the lab and stayed, and it turned into having this intern program that we started. So it really came from Chip and our genetic registry, and seeing we had a lot of young people with EDS, young people who wanted to go to medical school and do research. And so we were like, let's have an intern program. We got a donation from someone, and we decided to use it to have more hands in the lab, because it was just me and Chip and COVID. So we were like, it was like really just the two of us in the lab doing PCR all day. It was like so much fun. And we launched the intern program, and Roman can speak to being part of the first year. We had to sort of figure out how to do this, and it's been great, and it's grown into something that's so amazing that Molly really runs and does a phenomenal job with. But every year we get to learn from patients, both in our research, and I think they get to learn a lot about themselves too, and a lot about EDS from all of it. So.
I think that my second question really kind of builds on that. One of the things that patient scientists are able to do is bring not only their education, but their lived experience into the lab. So would one of y'all be able to share a moment where your lived experience directly influenced a research question or protocol, or how you interpreted data?
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. So one of the things that's been really cool for me is being in the lab since all of this started. I can just go to Dr. Norris and be like, hey, like I kind of like noticed this thing that's happening in the patient community. And he has never really said like, no. He's always like, okay, well, like, how are you going to test that? Or how are you going to do that in the lab? And more so just challenged me to kind of think about how I would address it experimentally, but never said like, no, you can't do the thing. So recently when Roman joined the lab, we started shifting some of our focus in lab onto mast cells, and Roman has been working on a lot of that stuff. And I was interested in it too, but I was recently pregnant, and while I was pregnant, I keep saying like, my mast cells left my body. Like, I had 0 mast cell reactions the entire time, and it was amazing. But it got me thinking, like, wait, what's going on with mast cells and hormones? And so one day I just sent him an email, and I was like, hey, I noticed this, and with like things we see with like puberty and like menstrual cycles of mast cells, like I think that like these hormones are playing a role, and maybe this is happening. And he was like, okay, do that. I was just like, wait, what? Just do that? And he was like, yeah, maybe, you can do it with an intern this summer. So that's something I've been focusing on now, like truly from an experience I had to translating that into research questions in the lab.
Yeah, and I think, ooh, that's loud. Everything that Cortney said, so many of the things that we do, like so many of the research questions we're asking are because it's, we want to figure out an answer to the science, but it really is also like, this helps unlock knowledge of my body too, which is so personal and so, it's not that you have questions keeping you up at night, but when you're doing this work and designing experiments, talking things out with Chip or Cortney, like that lived experience and knowing, okay, I get talking about mast cells and fibroblast interactions, and you read a lot of the literature and it's about allergy or lung fibrosis, dogs who have cancer, and there's nothing really about connective tissue disease. And you read about the outcomes of these interactions, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like what happens in people who have EDS. There's something different going on here. And kind of in my studies and learning about all this biology, like everything we learned about yesterday factors into all this somehow. It just helps me like create better questions and learning as a student. I guess informing that research, it really just, it's an extra layer. Like you go to school to learn information about what you're studying, but when you are a patient and you have that lived experience, you get to really, within like a scientific mindset, apply that to how am I going to run my experiments in mind to EDS, thinking about patients, how will this outcome help us understand my body, our bodies.
As an example of something that the Norris Lab influenced outside of the Norris Lab research, after being an intern in the program last summer, I came back to the lab I work at George Mason, and I said, hey, so I have a thing. It's called Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I'm being treated with L-DOPA, which is a medication. It's a precursor to dopamine, and Parkinson's patients are given it for movement disorder. And it changed my function in my life, and I wanted to know why. So I took it back to my lab after feeling this sort of empowering experience of being this patient and being able to take the science that I was interested in because of my personal experience. I took it back to my lab and I said, you know, what can we do about this? So now I'm researching Parkinson's disease because there's a lot more funding there and there is a lot more opportunity for a lab that isn't focused on EDS to then take Parkinson's research that I'm doing and eventually apply it to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome research. So it's just, even if a patient scientist isn't necessarily in one lab, having this experience, this collective patient-scientist experience can be really impactful all over science.
That leads me to my next question. So we've heard about it does help with the research direction, understanding the questions to answer, but is it ever challenging to be a patient in science? Is it ever complicated or empowering? What have been your personal experiences with it?
I think in some ways it's super empowering, not just for us, but I would say for other people in the community, at least from what I've been told. You have this, condition that is so commonly ignored, dismissed, and now you're taking that, and a lot of people don't have faith or trust in science or the medical community, and you're taking that and you're putting the power back into the patient's hands to be the solution. It's so empowering. Even if you come to our lab as part of our visiting scholar program, which I think Molly will talk about at some point, for a few days, the energy and the excitement that leaves from that people leave with from that program is so awesome. But it's also very hard. And there are times where maybe I'm at a very scientifically focused conference, right? It's not really about EDS, but I'm presenting my research there. And I always face that line of do I want to admit that I'm a patient right now? Is that going to invalidate the work that I do? I know in a room like this, it doesn't. But sometimes in the scientific community, I worry that it does. So it's a balance that you have to figure out how to navigate. And I'm sure it's probably even different for you going into medicine too.
That was a really good segue. I think there's ups and downs to working in research anyway. It's a hard field. And especially when you're a patient and you have appointments or flares, it really helps when you have a PI who is accommodating and understanding, and when you're surrounded by other patient scientists who get it. The other day I was I had 48, 50 something samples, and I'm just pipetting, and I had to put my neck brace on and my shoulder brace on, and I'm standing in a weird, PT friendly position. And no one's oh, are you okay? What? It's we get that we have to do things sometimes, and it's so nice to be in that safe space where you don't have to hide those things, and that life kind of goes on and people get it. And kind of what Cortney said, it's different. Do you want to share that to other people who aren't familiar with that field? Will they think things differently? And I definitely worry about that in medicine as well, because a lot of your work is physically dependent. I've had physicians tell me you have EDS, your body won't make it through residency. And, I've made it through clinical, I passed my step 1 exam. It's possible with accommodations and people who work with you. But it's a fine line, because you don't want to admit, I have a disability and can't do my work. I meet the prerequisites, I just have to pay extra mind to things. And that's okay. You have to trust me because I trust my body and understand how things are going on. And I feel it is hard to open up to random people sometimes who have no relationship with you. You don't know if they're going to be receptive to that or not. It's difficult. And I think by setting an example with this program and hopefully spreading this across the country with the visiting scholars, the intern program, and hopefully establishing models at other universities that maybe students, medical students, graduate students will feel more capable and open to be honest about their health like that. I think we really need to turn the tide because it really is possible. We're not, like we don't have limitations on the things that we can accomplish. We just have to be supported.
I think that's a great segue into this other angle, which is there's so much schooling involved in becoming a researcher or a doctor or anyone sort of in this researcher medical community. And I think that goes into the ableism and the non-inclusivity and the exclusion that happens in academic spaces. I had professors tell me, you need to switch majors. You can't be in STEM. You're not going to make it, because I've had 2 neurosurgeries in my time in college, and it's set me back a lot in my classes. And I've, overcome that, and it's been okay. But I think that having professors who I really look up to and people who are very well established in the field tell me, you don't belong here, it's been pretty impactful. And so I think that in addition to sort of reframing the space of patient science and patient physicians, I also think that there's a lot that needs to be done in academic communities to reframe sort of what STEM education looks like as a whole. How can we be more inclusive? How can we tailor STEM education to people with memory issues or difficulties with mobility? Or what does a academic lab look like that's inclusive? And so I think that by having a community of patient scientists and patient physicians and patient academics really advocating for all these changes, I think that's also a really important thing that's happening right now and needs to keep happening, because that's a really big issue in these spaces and it's a big barrier.
With that, what are some strategies, both practical, physical, and also emotional, have helped you to sustain your engagement in it when you're facing challenges like that?
For me, my biggest thing has just been taking advantage of when I feel good. So if I have like weeks or days that I feel really good, I might try to get more done at work so that I'm not feeling, behind when I have to take breaks. Also, people say this all the time, but like not comparing yourself to other people or not comparing your progress to other students. If it takes you longer to graduate, if you have to retake a course, I've withdrawn from classes. I did not have it wasn't bad, but I didn't have an amazing GPA in undergrad. It's probably why MUSC waitlisted me. You can still be successful. It's not, you don't have to be going at the same speed as everyone else. I think that's something that I've just really reminded myself is that, I can do all of these things and it might look different, but that doesn't matter. Also, being brutally honest with yourself and with your collaborators and mentors. I think people like us, if we're in these fields, we want to figure these things out. We want to overachieve and we want to keep going and going. And there is a point where you can push yourself over the edge and crash, and then you can't keep going. And I think a lot of us have kind of learned that at some point in our schooling, that taking care of your body, like Cortney said, using breaks when you can, working when you know you can, but also in your day-to-day life, maintaining and knowing how to listen to your body, use the tools that you have, that your care team has given you to keep you in the most optimal state. Because it is we do have chronic illnesses, and if we do push it too hard, we will crash. And I think that's not out of the ordinary. I think it's very possible to do all that, can work a 9 to 5 and be smart, can do your shift, doing your rotation in the hospital. I just think it requires extra planning and requires you to really I hate to say understand your limitations, but to understand how far your body can go before it starts to react, and that's okay. That was a really hard thing that I had to learn starting medical school. I pushed myself way too hard in undergrad, and I crashed at multiple points. And starting med school, I was this is a marathon, not a sprint.
and this whole career field, doing research, is a marathon, not a sprint. It is okay to like slow down and take care of yourself.
I want to add one more thing also that I've learned is don't care if you look weird. Like, who cares if you're wearing a neck brace? If that's gonna like help you get to where you need to be, that like Roman looked like a robot the other day. Like I looked at him and I just like looked away. Like I was like, all right, like whatever works. But like truly, like that is something, and I know it's so much harder when you're younger. Like, you know, like no one wants to like go, like I know that Molly's children have like, you know, gone to school in a neck brace in high school, and like that's not something that you want to do, but like who cares? Like who cares if you look weird? Like if it helps you do the thing that you need to do. I lay on the lab floor sometimes and people are like, ew, and I'm like, well, yeah, it's like probably gross, but
No, it's really gross.
and Chip does have a couch in his office, but it's the floor is hard and cold and it's different. And I'm like, okay, but if I lay on the lab floor for 5 minutes, I'm gonna be more productive and do better the rest of the day. So like I don't care if people walk in and they're like, that's weird, you know, just do the weird things if it helps.
You hit a point where like, you know, if this is what's going to be good for me, then like I'm going to prioritize what makes me feel good. I remember I was like I had to get like my skull, you know, to neck fused in high school. I had to have tether cord surgery, have a shunt. I was the rolling backpack kid with a neck brace for like half of high school. And I'm like, man, I don't care. I'm getting my body fixed so I can go on and like live my life. And I'm like, yeah, like who cares, you know? And now, you know, you do that, you push through, and you just, it's your identity. It's a part of who you are. And if they don't like it, I'm like, you know, forget about them.
If people ask like what's wrong, what happened, like you can make up a funny story. Like I told someone one time I was bit by a shark and they legitimately believed me. If you're gonna be weird and ask me on an elevator what happened, like I'm gonna tell you something weird.
One time I was in the hospital and I told everyone when I came back that I couldn't find a matching pair of socks. So have fun with it. But I was gonna say there's an awesome picture of me. It's my favorite picture from the Norris Lab of me. I'm doing something with tissue. I don't remember what it is. I think I was mounting tissue, but I'm wearing a neck brace and I'm sitting really funny. And it's actually my favorite picture ever from a lab because to me, that's the definition of empowerment. I think that having a mobility aid and doing something that I really love, like research keeps me going. It's why I'm still in school. It's why I haven't dropped out yet. It's why I haven't given up yet. Doing all these things, I'm like, that's like, look what my body can do. Like I'm doing research, I'm answering questions. And that's really beautiful. And so I think that in a way, research has also reframed how I feel about my body. I'm not really mad anymore because I can do all these cool things and I can answer all these cool questions and I can impact other people's lives too. And that's really, really amazing. And so I think that, you know, remembering that my mobility aids are allowing me to do all these awesome things and have all these amazing experiences and meet all these amazing people. It's actually completely changed how I feel about my situation too. The other thing I was going to say is that it's really, I'm still learning. You know, I'm constantly pushing myself to burn out, but I'm also learning how to not do that. And I think that's a process. But reframing my definition of normal has really, really helped. And I think that as I don't use the word normal as much anymore, because I think it's a stupid subjective word, like what does normal mean? That's also helped the people around me understand that there is no normal and it's fine if you're having an off day and that's okay. And so I think all my friends also have started to kind of take the word normal out of their vocabulary. And I think that's also been really amazing to watch.
Well, you answered a little bit of my next question, which is what's something you've learned, either scientific or personal, in this experience that you did not anticipate?
Sorry. I think something that I learned is, you know, now that I've worked with other students and mentored them, both students with EDS and students who don't have EDS, is to just treat everyone with the compassion and assumption that whatever the reason is that they're, you know, not here, late, sick, whatever the thing might be, their 15th grandma died this month. I don't care. You know, I'm going to be here to support you. And if there's a reason you're not showing up or a reason you can't do the thing, I don't care if your excuse is like a real one or not. Like, you probably need support and help. And I think it's just taught me to be really compassionate towards people. Sometimes we have interns who are like very open about their health. And, you know, maybe to us, they seem like the interns who are like struggling more. But I also know that the intern who has EDS, who's part of the intern program, who doesn't talk about their symptoms at all, is probably also struggling. And so I just feel like it's like really taught me to be really compassionate about how I work with people and kind of always assume the best from everyone. And maybe that ends up having you get taken advantage of once in a while, but to me it's worth it, because I know that the mentors and the people that I've had that have been kind and compassionate are the reason that I've been able to be successful. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
I think for me, it just like this whole experience has reinforced that like being honest and telling your story to other people is one of the most powerful things you can do, because we are a community and we have so much shared experience. Like, I remember being in like COVID college, sitting in like my friend's dorm room, and I got sent a Facebook link about the Norris Lab at MUSC is studying EDS and is taking summer research interns. And I'm like, what? There's a lab studying EDS? Like, what? But I read about it, and it's, you know, mentioned, you know, Cortney Gensemer is a PhD student who has EDS, and it's like, I just like, that was the first time I saw it. I was like, wow, there are like people who are like me who are doing this and are being successful in it. And I'm like, that, like anybody who makes it through that program comes in the lab and sees what's possible, gets to take part in it. Like, we all get that reinforcement that it's possible, and that we get shown that, and then we get to share that to others. We get to share our patient stories and experiences. As I think one of the hardest things about living with all these things is they can be really debilitating. Like, you can be bedbound, you can be stuck in the hospital for weeks, and like there's no end in sight. And you're like, I could never do that. I could never, you know, work 40 hours a week and keep consistency in my life. And it's like, we were all there at some point, and everybody's path to healing is different. Some of us may never get the doctors that we need, and that kind of is our call to action, is we need to raise that awareness. But I think for those of us who have been on all those sides and are able to integrate that experience, it's so important to share it, because it not only like does the research give hope, but those stories give hope. It gave me hope, and it is very just fulfilling to know that this mission that we have is just, it's providing hope.
Yeah, I think hope is really what I've learned. Like, I was not in a good place. Like, when I started college, I was really not mentally present. I didn't know what day it was. I could barely remember my own name. And so I think that coming from there to where I am now, hope is something that I didn't really know how to do. And now I'm here and I'm doing all these really cool things and meeting all these cool people. And I think that something that's taught me is that the more connections I make, the more mentors I have, and the more people that I can mentor. Because I'm now in that position in my other lab. And so I think that I've learned to rely on those connections for all sorts of things, and that everyone has something to teach me. And I think that's the one other thing that I've really learned, is that for me, learning is a coping skill. It's a coping mechanism. The more I learn, not just about my condition, but about the world around me, the more I understand how to get through it. And I think that's been really helpful.
To share a little bit about what we do at the Norris Lab, we have two programs that we run. One is a summer internship. It's the Gensemer Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome Intern Program. That's a big mouthful, so we call it HIP. We're on our 5th year of that right now, and we have had, as of the end of the summer, we'll have had 25 interns come through the lab through this program. It's 8 weeks, really intensive. They learn research skills, they work on a project in the lab that's part of our ongoing research, and they also are allowed to shadow clinicians in the field who are working at MUSC on EDS. It's a really powerful program, and it's designed for undergraduates and graduate students who are planning to go into science or medicine and hope to work in the field of EDS. The other program we have is the Visiting Scholars Program. And this is one that we bring people for short periods of time, usually 3 days. They come to the lab with a group of other individuals and have an opportunity to see what we're doing in the lab, learn about our research, get a glimpse of what it's like to do research. And for many of these students, it is the first time that they've ever met somebody else with EDS. And so for these students, it's an opportunity where they are instantly part of a community, and a community that is actively working towards good for them and other patients. That program applications are about to open, so if anyone's interested in it, you can go to our website, thenorrislab.com. Applications will open sometime in the next few weeks, and that will be during the school year.